Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. Today, we are talking about cover crops you can eat, but still get all those good cover crop things out of them. And we also get a mailbag question about cereal rye versus ryegrass as a cover crop. A very cover croppy day indeed. So let's do it. All right, I hope everyone is feeling well and doing well and all those good things. Before we dive in, always keep in mind, as you're out in your gardens, we'd love to see what you all are up to right now. You can let us know in the comment section, or better yet, upload a 20-second farm video clip to Dropbox or Drive and share it with Farmer Mike at no-tillgrowers.com. Always a highlight to see those. All right, so I think I've done a segment like this before, but I thought I would revisit this idea a little bit more in depth as we head into the winter and people are looking at their growing space thinking, I know I should cover crop, but also I need the space for food. What to do? Well, you're in luck because there are options for both the spring and the summer growing season, Southern Hemisphere, or the fall winter that may at least be worth playing around with here or there. So in this first segment, we'll talk about some of those possible combos for the fall and winter. And then in the second, we'll talk more about some of the other possible combos to think about for the spring and summer next year, along with some important soil prep tips. Okay, so for varieties and planting combos, let's start in the fall since that's where we're heading into here. One that comes to mind immediately, and you may be able to get a couple cuttings off of it before you let it do its thing, is just pea shoots. So what this looks like is that a dense stand of peas is sown around, like 5 or 6 weeks before the first frost. And you can start cutting it around 4 to 8 inches tall. If you let it get too big, it gets a little fibrous, but they are quite tasty when they're small. Now, these won't be exactly like the pea shoots that you grow in a tray in the greenhouse. Those are a little bit more tender. 1, because of the plastic, 2, because of all the water, and 3, because they're really, really dense. But the little tendrils that come up in the field can bulk up salad mixes quite nicely. We used to sell them in a salad mix with pea shoots at a premium price at market to great success. And you can't really overcut it, but they are good eats and a decent market option. One person who I know grows them really well in the field is Jody Roebuck over there at Roebuck Farm. So you could check out his work on growing pea shoots in the field. Very cool. And then you can just parlay that into a cover crop as long as you cut it, somewhat higher. But even once it gets past that point of being like a good pea shoot level, I will personally graze the pea shoots in the field basically until the first hard frost, like just picking off pea shoots as I go. Just kind of eating them. It's a good snack. Like I said, they get a little fibrous as they get taller, but I still dig that sweet pea shoot flavor. Next is the Brassica Bonanza that I've referenced recently. This could be kale, turnips, mustard greens, radishes, daikons, even collards to some extent. They are sown around 6 weeks before your first frost, and when sown thick enough, taking some of the turnips, radishes, kale, and etc. out of the ground to eat or sell opens up the canopy a little bit, but the other crops just sort of fill in that space if sown thick enough. It's a neat little trick I learned from where I did my apprenticeship at Bug Tussle Farm in Zone 7A in southern Kentucky. The brassicas will hang out all winter, flower in the spring, and that's when you can terminate them. In a colder region, they are more likely to winter kill, like the peas. But if you're in a slightly warmer region, you can kind of use that as a cover crop all season. Now, that's obviously not going to be super efficient on a commercial scale in general, like harvesting from that, but it can provide food as needed to both you and the soil. And heck, if you end up harvesting it clean, oh well. So some crimson clover underneath and call it a winter cover crop. Another thing you can do in the winter is to add cilantro, lettuce, spinach, arugula, or any of those other brassicas to any winter cover crop mix that you'd already planned. Just, to harvest out of that as much as you'd like. Again, if it's a commercial thing, well, you have to be more thoughtful about how you plant it just because harvesting has to be somewhat efficient. But if you have some seed left over from the season and you're not planning to plant one of those crops in that spot in the spring, no harm in throwing some of those veggies into the cover crop mix to snack on or harvest for robust winter markets or just as needed or as wanted. On that note, as always with cover crops, be very mindful of what you plan to use that area for next year. That means that you don't just want to avoid, crop families, but you also don't want to put, say, kale into a place where you want a winter killed cover crop because it might not winter kill. And then you'd have, a flowering kale to deal with in the spring, which can be a great chef item, honestly, if you like flowering kale. And it's very tasty, but not ideal if you want that bed for, say, onions in March. Beets can work in there as well. And then, you pull the beets and or leave some space, and the rest of the cover crop fills out that space. Chard too, where you harvest some of it and then leave the rest to grow, lightly mulch the surface, and then die and replenish the soil over the winter, or come back in the spring in warmer areas, probably to immediately bolt, but could maybe get a little bit extra out of that. As I am planting fall cover crops, I'm often sifting through my seeds to see what is not going to last well for the next year, like what I wouldn't be able to replant or what I don't need any more of. And then I see if I can squeeze that into the cover crop this fall. Anyway, that's the fall and winter basic stuff. Real quick reminder that next month is the theme song cover month. We'd love for you all to shoot a video or record a version of the theme song and send that to us. Again, upload to Dropbox or Drive, share it with Farmer Mike at no-tillgrowers.com, and hopefully we can kick off the show next month with as many of those theme song cover songs as possible. That would be rad. All right, we're going to take a quick break. In the next segment, we'll touch on some spring and summer options, as well as some bed prep and sowing considerations, not to be confused with sowing like a sowing machine. For sowing cover crops, we actually use a seeder. If we called them both sowing machines, we'd be in trouble. That was important to point out. BRB.
Hey there, Jesse, in the no-till growers community. A little update from zone 9A, or just super hot, is we're trying these fall cucumbers in 2 different ways of trellising. On this side, just drove a stake in the ground, run a piece of twine up to the wire, and I'll just twist them up. And then down here, we're gonna try the lower and lean method outside. I've never seen anybody do it. I've only seen it in grow houses. Let me know what your thoughts are. Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Good Agriculture. If the season is picking up and the pile of receipts is starting to grow, you're not alone. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping so you can stay ahead of the mess before it piles up. They keep your books organized each month, help you understand what's coming in and what's going out, and show you where your farm stands so you can make better business decisions throughout the season. If you're behind, they'll help get everything caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show. All right, so real quick, your options for a spring and summer cover crop that you can, maybe harvest a little bit from are lower in some ways than your options for a fall crop. However, something that can work, honestly, also in the fall, are flowers, both edible flowers and cut flowers. On the cut flower side, things like Lacey Phacelia and cilantro can be planted early alongside, say, spring peas, but the flowers can be cut for bouquets, and then the remaining greens can be mowed. It's a little tedious, as edible flowers tend to be, but you can also harvest the flowers of beans and peas as an edible flower for chefs or to be added to salad mixes. You could do the same thing with something like dill. I've not tried this next one myself per se, but I've often thought that nasturtiums planted into sorghum Sudan grass, maybe some like Sesbania or whatever else, in the summer could work as a flowering option to kind of fill out that ground space, but also maybe, to sort of use that sorghum as a little bit of a trellis to be able to grow those nasturtiums up and be able to get the nasturtium flowers off there a little bit more easily, so long as you don't, plan to keep the sorghum around all summer because the nasturtium flowers would go to seed. But like I said, for a time, the nasturtium would fill in any gaps and grow somewhat up and around the sorghum for perhaps slightly easier harvesting of the radishy, delicious flowers that they produce. Then, of course, where the crop rotation works out, you have beets, radishes, turnips, and etc. that can also be added to spring and early summer cover crops to just, harvest them as needed or as wanted. Again, that's not efficient in general, although I guess you could plant these things in rows and make them more efficient. But in a pinch, when you need an extra market item, you'd be happy to have them, just kind of hanging out. In worst case scenario, they are just fodder for the soil. It's just important to remember your crop rotations and not be mixing in a cash crop species where you plan to grow that crop species next. So no beets before spinach or radishes before broccoli, etc. Now, cover crop bed prep is nothing to shake a stick at because that won't work. Instead, prep a cover crop bed exactly like a cash crop bed. 100% you need to address compaction, add a little fertility because the cover crop will cycle that for you and keep it there. And sow the seeds at the right depths with good seed to soil contact and a healthy watering in. The better your cover crop does, the better the next crop will do, or at least like you can know it's going to do well. And when you do plant a cover crop with intentions to harvest from that crop, make sure there is something in there that you don't plan to harvest, like a grain, or at least crops that you can, let regrow a bit, like kale, before they die. That way you get some of the mulch effect of the cover crop, but also some of the long-term soil benefits. You will know you're harvesting a little bit too much when there are giant gaps that can't be or won't be filled out. You want full plant coverage towards the end of any cover crop's life. That's the goal. That helps suppress weeds, mulch the soil, and replenish/recycle the nutrients. Taking a little for yourself, though, is not going to hurt it a whole lot when done conservatively and in conjunction with crops that will be going back into the soil, or back onto the soil at least. In some cases, some amount of grazing can enhance the cover crop's soil benefits, so it can be human grazing, but we would also do that with our sheep many years ago, grazing summer cover crops that would grow back, and then we would remove the sheep and let those just sort of recover, and then eventually we would kill that cover crop. The sheep would, leave some quote unquote fertility of their own. You should not do that. But then the cover crop roots would die back a little bit, and then the crop would recover, increasing the soil life and organic matter under that cover crop. Anyway, thoughts or ideas on cover crops you can eat or use for cut flowers? On the cut flower side, we've thrown zinnias and cosmos into cover crop mixes before. Sunflowers are obviously a big part of our production here, though we don't usually mix in the pro cut varieties. So the ones that we do are not quite as good for cut flowers because the pro cut varieties are expensive. But like I mentioned, Lacey Phacelia, those other ones. Anyway, what say you all? Are there flower crops that you like? Regular crops that you like? Let me know. And otherwise, we're cover cropping right along with our mailbag question. Be right back. That joke will make sense in just a minute. Maybe not. Find out. Today's episode is brought to you by Holden Tool Company. Holden Tool Company is a family-run business specializing in high-quality hand tools and small batch manufacturing for growers of all kinds. They offer forged hoes, forks, scythes, sickles, pruning tools, orchard tools, and forestry tools featuring traditional European designs that are hard to find at ordinary garden centers. These tools are practical, durable, and made for people who typically do work by hand. Holden Tool Company provides thoughtful customer service, helping you choose the right tool for your body, crop, or task. Find them online at farmandgardentools.com and use the code NTG26 at checkout. That's farmandgardentools.com. All right, back to the show. All right, we take Patreon questions every day on the show, and if you'd ever like to submit one, feel free to sign up for our Patreon page at patreon.com/no-till growers. Go to the latest show thread and put one in. If you like the show, that's the best way to show it. Yeah. All right. Today's mailbag question comes to us from Thomas, who asks, quote, I broadcasted a cover crop mix last autumn that had both ryegrass and winter rye in the mix, along with crimson clover, tillage radish, vetch, and chicory. I didn't know rye has an allelopathic effect and got a nice surprise this spring with the perennial weeds drastically stunted in that area. I thought rye is rye and quickly learned otherwise, and I went to buy single species cover crop seed. How do you choose between rye and ryegrass on your farm? Wishing you all the best. And here's to a hopefully gentler El Nino cycle, because we're all about that rain, no flooding. I think that's all about that rain, no. Yeah, I got it. End quote. All right. Thank you. And great questions here. First, I should say, I feel like the super El Nino has been rearing its head here lately. The rain, the storms, this is not like any fall I can remember. I usually do not have to mow anything, paths, yards, around the garden, anything, in the month of August, basically at all. But it's been straight up spring here. And plants are just exploding with life, which is good. And also I'm a little tired, so I could use it to chill just a little bit. And also we just had like the most insane lightning the other day. Anyway, yeah, there are two main types of rye in terms of cover crop on the market, really. Perennial rye, ryegrass, and cereal rye or winter rye, or often just called rye. The biggest difference is that word perennial. That means it's going to keep coming back after you mow it low to the ground, unlike cereal rye that can be more easily terminated. In general, most growers are not going to want perennial ryegrass in their gardens because that will either take a really long tarping to kill or a tillage event of some sort. And ryegrass does have some allelopathic abilities, but they are not quite as pronounced as the cereal rye. However, there is some intriguing evidence that ryegrass oversowed into Bermuda grass may inhibit the Bermuda grass, which, I don't know, in a really bad infestation could be a helpful tool over time. Or if you just have an area where you'd like it to eventually be gardens, but see it as futile currently because of the Bermuda grass, could be an approach to sort of reducing that. But I think the science is still out on how much or how effective that would be in the long term. Anyway, in general, gardeners need to look for annual rye, aka cereal rye, not ryegrass or perennial rye, though ryegrass would work in pathways as it's not a super aggressive spreader. Or if you're doing an orchard or berry planting, having the ryegrass fill in some of that space can be helpful, though you will also want to mix in some clovers and other stuff in there. And also, you mentioned chicory in there, another perennial, or at least can perennialize, because it just has a really, really deep taproot. So ryegrass and chicory I'd probably leave out of my cover crop mixes in general, unless I'm sowing those around like an orchard or somewhere I don't need to use it. And well, that's pretty much the gist. I hope I was at least a little bit helpful here. Otherwise, listeners and viewers, I think we can call it a Monday. Let's call it a Monday, or whatever we want to call it. Yeah, it's our world. We can call it Fun Day. Yep. Have a great fun day. Forget not that No-Till Growers is a not-for-profit 501c3. Donations are much appreciated, and you can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and or subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That is a super easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Big thank you to Michelle. Big thank you to the No-Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production, help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of August. We're over halfway through it, just noting that. You get a shout on the show, so big shout outs today to, it's a mystery because I didn't pull them up. Love mysteries. Matt Riles and Kim Japinga. Welcome, y'all. Appreciate that, and I will appreciate it by telling you a ridiculous story. This week's story is about Jim. Jim Joe, actually, is his name. Jim Joe runs Jim Joe's nursery, and Jim Joe grows exclusively native plants. Native, that is, to Jim Joe's home state of Arizona. It's an expansive operation with 5 employees, getting a lot of contracts from the government and working with lots of ecological restoration companies. Had heard a recent show about it, started a company, it was a good idea. And anyway, one day, he gets a tip from a rancher near Flagstaff about what seems to be a parasitic plant acting peculiar. How so? Well, that is for tomorrow on The Creepy Crawlies. I don't know if that title's going to stand. I don't know that it's not. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.